Button Shy Games is a company that specializes in making small but interesting 18-card driven games, and they've been my go-to for buying Christmas gifts for the last 2 years. So I was pretty excited to get a chance to take a look at something new from them. Battlecrest Fellwoods, and specifically with the Imperator Solo expansion. I have a bit of a hard time getting two-player skirmish games to the table with enough consistency to make reviewing them a little more difficult than I would hope. And so going into that, especially with how busy things are this time of year, I informed Button Shy that I probably would not be able to take on this review. That's when they informed me that there was an expansion that included solo play. So I jumped on the opportunity, and I'm here to report my findings. Essentially, the base game gives you the terrain cards as well as 2 playable characters. The skirmish is fought across an invisible grid that you seed the terrain cards across in accordance to the rules. A character may have a minion or item, as well as a series of action cards at their disposal. Each character starts at an opposing end of the field and then begins their fight to the death. On a player's turn, they perform 2 from a short list of possible actions. They can move, activate an action card, which they exhaust by rotating it 90 degrees, prime an action card, which is essentially exhausting the card without using its action, or refocus, which allows a player to reactivate all exhausted action cards, but also flips them to their opposing side, offering a slew of new options. When a card is exhausted, it provides potential bonuses for other actions, which is why priming may be of use. There are special actions and rules in regards to items and minions as well. And without getting too into the reads, because there are some fantastic how to play video games out there, the game continues until one player has knocked the other player's health down to 0, and then the game ends and the victor is declared. In terms of the solo game, the expansion provides a deck of cards that act as an AI. Each playable character in the base game and expansion has a sheet that dictates details on how the specific character prioritizes its actions. You take your turn and then you play the AI deck and do whatever the opposing player is dictated to do by that deck, and you continue until one player wins. And credit where credit is completely due, Button Shy is known for hiring designers that create games that know how to utilize that 18-card limit to the best of, to an almost unimaginable, it wouldn't be unimaginable because they obviously imagined it, so to a pretty impressive degree. And this game is no different. You're given a pretty well fleshed out 2-player skirmish game, something that you wouldn't expect to find in, well, something about this big that can easily fit in your pocket. Double it up if you include the expansion, which has 2 extra characters and the AI deck. The game itself is interesting, it works well, and it's impressively compact. I can't think of a single game that gives you as fulfilling of a skirmish experience in this small of a package. Sure, there's other small take-that games, but this isn't that. This is a tactical skirmish game that has you maneuvering characters, has you deciding which actions you're going to take, and strategizing on how best to deal with the terrain and the different challenges that the terrain provides. Each character is unique in the abilities that it has. Some of them have minions, some of them have items. It's a pretty full game, especially for its size. And the variation in the action cards and the fact that the action cards are double-sided gives you flavor with each specific character, and each specific character and their actions and how they're played is very different from each other. And the physical playing area is clever. The fact that it utilizes blank spaces in this invisible grid system to dictate your movement is about as good as you can get with an 18-card game. But is that good as in terms of a full-fledged skirmish game? It works, but it's clunky. Now, maybe I'm just partial to hexagons, and maybe I'm just partial to not having to imagine squares, but the idea that you are maneuvering around a grid that is essentially invisible gets a little funny for me in terms of a skirmish game. Like I said, it works. You're supposed to imagine this grid out on the table, and each square in the grid or each rectangle in the grid is the size of a single card. So you're moving your cards in accordance to that grid. It works fine. It worked better in Rove, another single-player spatial puzzle game, because this isn't a spatial puzzle game. This is a skirmish game. The concept of being able to quickly reference what you're looking at and understanding where the location is isn't something that you should have to figure out. It should be something that you should know immediately. It's something that should be expected of a skirmish game, but isn't quite here. Now, it's not hard to imagine where things are, and it's not difficult to figure it out. but it is less intuitive than a skirmish game that includes a full map or includes hexagons or includes figurines. And so it's hard. It's hard to compare something so compact, something so unique, and something so impressively ingenuitive, and compare it against something that is just can't compare in terms of components. But that's what I've come to expect from skirmish games, and that's what I don't get from this particular game. It works. It doesn't work as smooth as a game that's much, much bigger. But it takes the minimal resources that it has and it really utilizes them to the best of their ability. I mentioned the double-sided action cards. The terrain cards themselves also have two sides to them. So when something activates on an action or on a terrain space, oftentimes that terrain card flips and it changes what happens there. Some of those terrain cards have hazards on them that you can attempt to knock other players into, knock their health down. You're given a plethora of options with such a minimal amount of cards. It's very, very impressive. And the solo mode worked about as well as you could expect a solo AI system to work. But there's a reason why I don't seek out too many skirmish games at solo play. It's work, and it's not a completely smooth system, figuring out the priority of each specific character and how to maneuver them, again, because this grid system is invisible and there's sometimes questions on where exactly to move a minion or a specific character when the AI is taking their turn. And I found myself referencing not only the rulebook, but BGG as well, trying to look through the forums to figure out exactly what type of move I should take. The fact that it's there and the fact that it does work and it works well, especially once you get the hang of it, is good. This game, I'm very impressed with this game. All things considered, they knocked it out of the park with the fact that this is a skirmish game that works in such a small form factor. It not only works, but it has interesting choices, interesting design choices, interesting things for the players to do, and it has a working AI deck so that you can actually play a skirmish game essentially anywhere and take it with you and carry it in your pocket, and you can play it solo. It does all that pretty well. Now, where I have a hard time with it is that I'm not sure how often I'm going to want to play a small skirmish game. If I'm out and about, I don't know if I'm bringing a skirmish game with me. It's not fair to compare this to a game like Unmatched. But if I were to play a skirmish game, I probably wouldn't bring a small skirmish game with me somewhere. If I'm going to choose a small game, I'm going to take, honestly, I'll take Rove with me. I'll take another button shy game with me. I don't see myself taking a skirmish game like this. And the hard thing I have is if I'm at my home, if I'm at my table and I'm playing a skirmish game, and I want to play a skirmish game, I'd have a hard time not reaching for something else. This is clever. The design choices are well made. The characters are cool. The actions that the characters can take are cool. For me specifically, this might just not be my cup of tea. The faults are not necessarily in the designs. The fault for me is in the limit and the comparison of other skirmish games and the situations that I would pull out a skirmish game to sit down and play. Anyway, that's Battlecrest. It is a cool system. The characters are cool. I am interested to see what else comes from this system. But yeah, that's what I got. Once again, I'm Plumpy Thimble. Feel free to look me up on just about any social media. That includes TikTok, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, probably a bunch of others, at Plumpy Thimble. Thank you very much for watching.